Alright, Cray Mark here from Cray Mark Guitars. I'm going to put together this Surf Stratocaster. I saw Dick Dale and I got inspired. So I got me a swamp ash body from a guy in southern Ohio that duplicates these 57 Strat bodies out of swamp ash. They're very accurate. And need a little sanding to get them there, but we all know I could build a body from scratch and I can build a neck from scratch, but you know what? I don't have time to wait for me, so I'm gonna go ahead and I went to Warmouth and I got this quarter sawn vintage Strat neck with a Clapton style soft V back. Hopefully it'll stand up to the heavy gauge strings because I'm going to put 16 to 60 strings on this thing. 0.016 to 0.060. Very few people could play a guitar with strings that heavy, but after years of playing, I think I got the muscles to do it. Alright. Can't be bending strings too much. Alright, over the years I've found out a lot of things about Stratocasters and Fender guitars. The first thing I find out is that they're using shorter neck screws to keep the neck on now. Well, I got hold of, the ones you get from Fender are 1 3/4 long. And I just don't think that's enough bite. My old 60 Strat I have had 2-inch screws. They were ground down a little bit. So I found these 2-inch screws, and I took a little bit off, so they're more like 1 7/8 inches, but I got an extra 1/8 inch of bite now into my neck, which is very important, I think, for the tone. So I went ahead and ground them all down, and I'm ready to mount the neck. And the other thing about new guitars is these holes in the neck are always small, so that you actually have to screw the screw down through this and then screw into here. Well, that's so wrong. I'm a machinist, I know about this stuff. That is so wrong. You got to have clearance in the body. The screw's got to be loose, so it pulls the neck good, nice and tight down into the pocket. No, there's no other. The only other reason I can see why I put the small holes is when they're manufacturing, it holds the screws in there, so that when they get the neck, they just screw it on. But you can't have threads in the body and the neck, and you can't get a good bite on the neck. So that's my take on it. So here's my shop dog, Leo, Coon Dog. Hey, Coon Dog, say hey. He's a good boy. All right. So I'm going to take you through. I'm going to build this guitar here. I got a whole bunch of parts, all Fender parts, and I'm going to end up doing an Olympic white, which I think is a nice color with a tortoise guard, pick guard. I'll probably do a matching headstock color. So I'm going to take you through all and show you little tricks I've learned over the years of putting these guitars together. I mean, there's little things that make a custom shop better than a Mexican guitar, even though the Mexican guitars aren't that bad, I don't think. The early Fenders were made a lot. Most of the people working at Fender in the early 50s and 60s, or mid 50s to 60s, were from Mexico. Look at Abigail winding the pickups. So I have my opinions on it, you know, but I got a vintage tremolo block. I got vintage saddles. And since I'm using such heavy strings, I'm going to try something here. I'm going to mock this guitar up before I start painting it. I'm going to check the intonation, because when using heavy strings, a lot of time these little bridge sections have to go all the way back to get the right intonation, and sometimes they're almost hitting this plate back here. So I'm going to string it up and do a test on it, and I might have to move this whole bridge back anywhere from 1/8 inch to 3/16 of an inch back to get the proper. And I like to get the saddles in the middle of the travel when everything's at the 12th fret right. So that's one of the major things I'm going to check today. And I'm going to put a blend circuit in here, because this is going to be a surf machine. It's going to be for playing surf music. And I'm kind of excited and I can't wait to get it playing here. So I'm going to make this video and I'm going to YouTube it, and hopefully you'll learn some stuff from it. I've been around a while. I've worked on these guitars for 40 years. I learned a couple tricks. So, Cray Mark. Just got over a bad cold, so I sound kind of funny. Cray Mark and his Coonhound Leo. Blue tick Coonhound dog. He's a good boy. You good boy. You good boy. Alright. Oh yeah, one more little fact, to tell you how much of a Fender freak I really am. I named my dog Leo after Leo Fender. So, Cray Mark guitars. Alright, I'm going to bolt this neck on here. Okay, one thing when you're putting these necks on, I take a little paraffin block and I rub some wax on the threads. Don't use Vaseline, it'll soak into the wood. Don't use a power screwdriver, for Christ's sakes. Put them in by hand so you can feel what's going on. You don't crack anything if it gets too tight. Don't force it. So just bring them down nice and snug, and it should be good to go. Alright. Alright. We got us a neck. A guitar with a neck. Looking good already. I'm excited. Alright. Let's get the bridge on. Then we're going to make a nut out of bone, of course. No plastic. Bone nut. And then I'm going to put the couple of the outside strings on, and I'm going to check my intonation. I'll show you how I'm going to do that. And see if I got to move this bridge back. If I got to move the bridge back, I got to plug these holes and come back a little bit. I might have to make this pocket a little bigger, but I have a milling machine. I am very capable of that. So, all right. So let me get the bridge on here, and then I'll be back with you. Take care. All right, we got the bridge installed here. I just used 3 screws because it's gonna be temporary. Got the claw in there. I had to drill a 6-degree hole to get the claw mounted. I see that I'm gonna have to mill out take a ball cutter and on my mill and mill out little troughs so I can get in there and adjust the truss rod without taking the damn neck off every time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a bone nut up here, and I'm going to lightly notch it for the outside strings, and I'm going to check my intonation. You know, I'm a machinist. I'm just in awe of the simplicity and the beauty of this guitar that was designed in 1954. It was released in 54. I'm sure they started before that, but just the way the whole thing goes together, it's just a beautiful thing. I think it should be one of the top 5 engineering marvels of the world, my opinion. My brother likes Egypt, you know, he went to see the pyramids and that, but I think this is just as cool. And plus you make sounds on it that are from outer space, so you know, what could be better? You know, form and function they call it. So I'm gonna mock up, make the nut here, and then I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna check my intonation here, and hopefully I don't have to move this bridge back, because with the heavy strings these saddles usually end up way back here. I can't even have a spring probably on there. So I'm gonna make sure I take care of that before I go any further. So stay tuned for Cray Mark. You know, I know you can buy stuff like pre-made nuts and that, but this is my bone selection here. I buy blanks. I buy them bigger than I need them, so I can make them whatever size I want. Here's a piece of unbleached bone, which is probably going to be good. Looks like it'll fit the slot. A little work. So I don't fool around. I make everything from scratch because it's the only way. So I got a piece of bone here, unbleached bone. I think I'm going to try that one first because it looks old. So after a little bit of cutting and shaping, we'll have us a nut, and I'll be back then to show you what's going on. Okay, like I said, this is a Warmoth neck, and usually the slot in the bottom of the fingerboard is radius at a 7 1/4. It's a 7 1/4 inch radius neck. Kind of a good thing. Our friends at Warmoth just made that slot flat at the bottom, so I don't have to worry about putting radius on the bottom of the nut. I got a piece of bone. It's only about 8 thousandths thicker than it needs to be to fit in the slot. So I'm just going to put it on a flat piece of steel here that I bought at an estate sale with a piece of sandpaper, and I'm just going to slowly work that thing down till it just goes in there nice and tight. It's got to be tight or it's going to rock, and you don't want that. Sometimes it's good to rock and roll, but not with your nut. Okay. Alright, she's almost down. She is down. Alright. Not quite. Don't breathe in this bone dust, it'll kill you. I'm going to put a little chamfer at the bottom just to make sure it seats good. And there we go. That sucker is down. Okay, we got us a nut blank. I'm going to put a 7 1/4 radius on the top. And I'll show you how I'm going to do that in a second here. Okay, I got a radius gauge, 7 1/4. How about that? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the width of it here. I'm going to put a little B on the top, which means the base side. Then I'm going to take it over and one of the best things I ever learned in my life was to be a machinist, because you can use his skills everywhere. Learn how to make things square, flat, and precise. I really can't do it any other way now, but sometimes the setup takes longer than the actual procedure. So alright, I'm going to take it over and trim it. I'll be right back. Got my radius gauge here, and I'm going to scribe this radius on top of the nut blank here. See? Now I'm going to take it over the sander over there, and with adequate ventilation, I'm gonna put that radius on top there. So I'll be right back. dust collection. Very important when working with bone. You don't want to breathe this stuff at all. It'll kill you. Right, Leo? Right, Leo doll? This stuff will kill you. Huh? Right. Damn right. And there we have our nut blank, ready to glue into place. It should be a lot higher than it needs to be, but after I get all the strings cut, slots cut in there, I'll bring it down to just the top of the strings or just a little below, which is the proper way to do her. So I just use Elmer's glue to put it in there. You don't want to put no super glue or anything epoxy. You want to be able to get the nut back out of there if you need to. That way, all you do is tap it with from the end. It'll fall right out of there with a little. If you don't use the wrong glue. Like I said, white glue, Elmer's white school glue is plenty good to keep that nut in place. So that's what I'm going to do. That is how I covered the name up like you're supposed to. But that's what you use, white glue. Don't use epoxy, don't use super glue, don't use Gorilla Glue. Those glues have their uses, but not in guitar work. Most of the time you want to be able to undo the work you did with the glue, so use something you could soften up with some heat and some water. So alright, I'm going to glue that sucker in there, and I'm going to probably take my dog for a walk, and I'll be back, and we're going to put some strings on this thing. Got to put the tuners in and keep on going. I'm having a good time. I love this. This is what I like to do. So okay, I got the nut glued in there, and I notice I left it a little long on the ends, so I can dress it off after the glue dries nice and flush. So you hardly need to clamp it. I'll throw a clamp on there real quick, but let her dry. Clamp it, Jed. Alright, I'm ready to put the tuning keys on this sucker. Got some nice Clusen vintage style. And one thing I always do is break this sharp edge here on both sides. Not too much, you know. You got a flange on the bushing. It'll cover it up. But what happens if you leave it sharp is when you paint, the paint will chip off right there at the sharp corner. And a very important thing when installing these bushings is not to have too much press fit. I like 3/1000ths is like good. And once you paint it, it's gonna fill it up. You know, you got to re-ream the holes after you paint. You don't want too much press because you have a great chance of splitting the headstock up here if you try pressing, especially that last bushing. If you try pressing it in there too hard, it's gonna split. I prefer them to just like fall in there, just about push in there with your hand, and then put a little white glue on them, and they'll stay in there real nice. So I'm gonna go in there and wrap those out with a split rod, basically a dowel rod with a split in, and put a piece of emery cloth in it, in my Dremel, and just go in there and kind of like get those holes to where this thing just lightly pushes in there. That's how I believe they should be. You don't want too much press, and like I said, I broke all the edges. So the nut's good and dry. It's ready to shape. I'm going to bring it up flush here, and we're doing pretty good here. So I'll talk to you later. Alright, I got these suckers like I like them. You know, this is, you put the bushing in there and you just push it in with your finger, and look, that sucker is almost down. No cracky. Especially this last hole. So be careful. Alright, I got all the bushings installed. I got ready to put the keys on. Here's like a real trick to line up these Clusen keys. Just take a straight edge and lay it up there, and they automatically align themselves nice and straight. So you mark your holes with a pointer, and then I'm going to take a drill with a piece of tape to stop the depth, and I'm going to drill my pilot holes for my screws for my keys. Easy peasy Japanesey. Don't drill through the headstock. That's the main thing you got to tell yourself. So what I do is I take a piece of tape on a drill, and I mark how deep I'm going. I put the tape, you know, so it stops me, and I stop a little short of that even. And you don't want to drill through the headstock. So, all right, got my little pointer here. I'm going to mark the holes. Pop, 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 pop out. Drill them. Install the keys, and then I'm ready to cut the nut slots. Put some strings on this thing. All right. Okay, I got my drill here, and I marked my depth with this piece of blue tape, and that's going to show me that I can only go so deep. I played it pretty safe here, so I will not break through. So let's go ahead and drill some holes. Alright, so I've got the first and last hole drilled, so I'll put the first and last key on there first, and then I'll line the rest of them up and do the same thing. Okay, one little thing here, kind of another genius idea. When they went to put these Clusen keys on, you know, they have these little flanges on them. Well, to get them all to be in a line real clean, they actually snipped off the flanges on the keys that go between the inside and outside keys, high E, low E, so they fit up against each other. Very ingenious, I believe. So you get a really clean look when they're all installed. This is a set of real Clusen vintage keys. So I'm going to put the rest of the screws in, and then we're good to go. Alright, there you have it. No extra holes. Nice clean job. Clusen stamped steel tuners. Alright, now I'm gonna put the extra screws in the bridge, I guess, and I'm gonna string this baby up and see what we got. You know, I told you before, don't use a power screwdriver. Put a little wax on the threads, it really helps. If you got the right size pilot hole, there should be no resistance when you put the screw in. It should go in real nice. You don't need to be powering that in there, because you might end up cracking something, or you gotta feel what's going on, you know. Old school. Now when you take the screws out, you can use a power screwdriver. I don't care, but when you go in by hand. Nice light swamp ash body, rosewood board. Seymour Duncan Antiquity Strat pickups, CTS pots, all American stuff. I can't wait to play old Mr. Lou on this baby. Alright, proper way for a Fender tremolo, you're supposed to bring these outside screws down right till they touch the plate, and these inside screws you're supposed to back them off a little bit so the tremolo has room to work when you push down on the bar. A lot of people don't know that, but there's a bevel underneath here that allows the tremolo, the bridge to tilt forward when you give it the whammy bar. So. Alright, I'm going to put some strings on here, and I'm going to put some nut slots. I'm going to show you how to do the nut slots in a minute. Get these big wires on here. $60 to 16. Look out, buddy. This is Dick Dale's string gauge. 60, 48, 38. 18, 20, and 16. Not for sissies. You gotta have the biceps. See my biceps? Alright, we're gonna string it up. You know, I just happen to have this pick guard. It's a tortoise shell pick guard loaded with Seymour Duncan antiquity pickups, a new old stock spray cap, an American CTS pots, and a 5-way switch. I had them on I had a 83 Squire Strat that I put this stuff on, and I didn't like the Strat. I could never get friendly with the thing, so I ended up selling it. One of the few guitars I ever sold that I owned. But I'm gonna go ahead and put that in place before I string it up with these huge wires I got on here. Just so I get a feel of the whole thing, how it's going to be. And hopefully later on I'm going to take it out and play the damn thing a little bit and see how she runs. So, looking good so far. If your workbench don't look like this, you ain't working. Okay, I only put a few screws to hold the pickguard down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I learned when I painted my first guitar back in '75, something like that. And the less holes you have in the wood when you're painting, the better. And a little trick I do is before I run to start painting, I'll fill the holes back up with some wood filler. It'll leave a little indent so you know where they're at. So after you're all done painting and doing all your wet sanding and that, then you can repop the holes through the filler. Because if you leave the holes in there when you're painting, when you start wet sanding, the water gets down in the hole and it'll blister the paint and it'll peel, and it's just a big mess. So the fewer holes you got in your body, I'm not going to put the jack plate on. I'm just going to attach a jack, let it hang there when I try it out. The fewer holes you got in your body before paint, the better. Remember that. Cray Mark told you. This is going to be a nice guitar. I'm excited. I'm always working on other people's stuff, so I get to work on my own stuff, you know, so. Hurry up, Mark. Hurry up. By the way, you will not see a clock in my shop. No clock, no clock, no clock, no clock. Because whatever time it takes to do this kind of work, it takes. You can't rush it, you can't hurry it, and you shouldn't be. You can't make no money doing it that way, but that's tough. It's a craft, it's an art. You're creating an instrument, you're not trying to get to work here. So don't hurry, don't look at the clock, don't worry, oh, I only made $1 an hour. Well, that's just the way it goes. But when you're done, you're going to get a nice guitar. It's going to be like a $2,000 custom shop when I'm done with it. Yeah. Hopefully. But I'm pretty sure at this point. Okay, they got these safety post strings. You stick the string down in there so that you don't have any sharp ends sticking out when you're done, which is another ingenious idea. The way I do this when I'm putting these strings on, I go 4 posts past the string post. So 1, 2, okay, you got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I go up to 4, and I'll snip off the string right there, and that gives me enough windings to get at least 2 windings around the peg when I'm all tuned up. So they say 3, but I go 4. What the hell? You can always cut a little off if it's too much. So like I say, 4 past where you're going to be at, and cut it off. And there you go. Another gauge I use a lot of times, you go like this at the 12th fret, and that gives you enough string to wind. So I'm a little heavy here, a little long on the string. I think I'm going to cut 1, 2, 3. Make sure you're pulled all the way up. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I'm a little too much here. 4 is plenty. I do use a string winder, but I don't go all the way, just enough to get it going. There's a lot of aggravation, a lot of cranking for your old wrist. These strings are huge. I'm going to have to go 3 windings because it's so big. My bad. 1, 2, 3, so I'm going to cut some more off this sucker here. Alright, that's about as much as I could get on there, and that's good though. Alright, I'm going to get the other ones on there, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, one of the trickiest things here when you're making a new nut with no slots in it, you get your 2 outside strings and you set them exactly where you want them over the frets. Over the years, I found out I like at least an 1/8 inch from the edge of the first fret to the center of the string on each side, because I don't like the string falling off the edge when you're playing hard and that. So what you do is I get the string right where I want it with a little tension on it. I'll put a pencil mark on each side of the string, and then I'll find the center of that slot, that little pencil mark. So I'm going to go ahead and mark the 2 outside strings where I want them, and we'll go from there. Okay, I got my pencil marks on there, and you want to go down the fingerboard, make sure the string's about the same distance in all the way down. Same with the high E. It's looking pretty good. Over the pickups, everything's lining up real nice. How'd that happen? Alright, now I'm going to show you what I do. This is kind of my trick here. I'm sure other people do the same, but this is how I've done it. I have cut some nuts in my time. Let me get you a good view here. What's going on? Alright, what I do is, once I get the slot marked where I want it, see the pencil marks? Hard to see, but they're there. I take one of these X-Acto, like 20 thousandths weight razor saw, okay? What I'm going to do, I'm going to put it right in the center of that slot as best I can, and I'm going to saw a little bit. Then I'm going to take a bigger saw, because this is a bigger string. I'm going to start my teeth are too coarse on that. So I got this a little file that I took the edge off the flats, and I got just a cutting edge on the ends here. I'm going to actually start my notch. Now when you're filing these nut slots, you always want to have the file tipped back like this, not parallel with the fingerboard, but backs, because the front edge is where you want your string to ultimately touch, because that gives you your intonation, your scale length, and all that. So always cut at an angle like that. Okay. So I got enough for the thing to sit in. Okay. The string's sitting in there with a little bit of tension on it. They're still way too high, but that's alright. I'm going to do the same thing with the high E here. Get my razor saw. Put it right in the center of the slot. Where the marks I have there. And gotta put the camera down for a second here. Use my thumb as a guide. Now this saw is about the perfect one for this string. Again, I'm at an angle. And it's looking good. I like where I see. Okay. Now, secret weapon. This is the most ingenious thing I've ever seen. And I'm going to do a little advertisement because Stuart McDonald is where I got it. But this string spacing rule, it's a marvel. What you do, once you got your two outside strings, you find marks that line up with your outside strings exactly. Okay, once you do that, it gives you marks where all the other strings go, so you don't have to calculate because the strings are different widths, so the centers aren't the same, blah blah blah. But how they ever figured this one out, I have no idea. But this thing is like if you're a luthier or you work on guitars, you better be having one of these string spacing rules, or you're just like wasting your time. So alright, so I'm going to find my two outside marks wherever they're at, and I'm going to mark the rest of my strings. And what I do is I loosen these strings up. Another little trick here. I'm showing you all my secrets. Put the strings off to the side. Always good to have a string winder, a manual one around. Put the strings off to the side so I can mark my new slots. So let me get it figured out and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, I found my two outside notches on this magical rule here, and I don't know if you can see real well. Let me get my light up here. But see, you line up. They're kind of an X with a circle on them. Your two outside notches, and then it gives you your spacing so you can mark your notches for the rest of your strings. It's ingenious, and it works every time. So I got my marks. I'm gonna start my slots with this razor saw, and I got a bunch of gauge files here with the right gauge thicknesses for the strings. I'm going to start cutting my notches to get it down close to the fingerboard. When I do setups in that, I start with a 19 thousandths feeler gauge between the string and the first fret is a good place to start. 0.019 all the way across. Some guys will go less on the treble, but I start with 19 all the way across, play it, and then kind of fine tune them as you're playing it. But 19 is a good place to start. I like my action about 100 thousandths, almost an 1/8 inch at the 12th fret, which is pretty high, but that's how I like it. 93 thousandths, 3/32 is a good place for everybody else. I want about 10 to 12 thousandths of cup, of reverse bow, not a hump, but a cup in the between the 12th fret and the 5th fret for a little bit of relief is what I like. 12 works real nice. 10, you could go to 10, but with a 7 1/4 board, 12 seems to work. So, but these big heavy gauge strings, you know, things can change. We'll see. You got to play it in. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my notches started here, and I'll show you what I'm doing. All right, I'm real close within range here. My 19 thousandths number, the high E, I pretty much hit it with the saw right away. Got a little too close for comfort, but I'm good still. So I'm a little wide, you know. I got to trim the sides of the nut, and then I got to bring the top down. I'm gonna, with my Dremel tool, I'm gonna take the strings, put them off to the side. I'm gonna take it down, kind of start shaping the nut a little bit, finishing it up here. And the sucker's almost ready to play for the first time. Here's a repair guide trick to get the strings out of the way. You put a piece of plastic binding in here to keep the strings below the neck and out of the way of the grinder when I'm starting to bring the top of that nut down. So you learn things over the years, you know. Just listen. Keep your eyes open. If you're good enough to be adept with a Dremel, then it really saves a lot of time. I got it pretty close. I'm gonna get a couple of my favorite files here, and I'm gonna work that down a little more. Basically work it down, dress the sides off flush, polish it up with some 6-800 grit silicone paper. Break the sharp edges, and that's going to be good enough for now. I could fine tune it in a little later, but that's a custom made nut. It's coming out pretty nice. I've done a few. You got to do them. You got to take your time. You got to take your time. If you go too deep, you got to either shim the nut, make a new one, or do all kind of fancy stuff. So save time, take time. Another little trick I use when I want to get the guitar up on the side like that, I put a jug of water on the bench, and I lean the guitar against that. That way I can work on the nut, on the side of the nut, and it kind of holds things up. Okay, I got it nice and rounded up here. I might come down later with it, but I'm up to like 600 grit. My slots are pretty close. It's ready to play. I gotta play it and see, and then I'll make some fine adjustments. But I got the sides dressed real nice. Definitely put a big radius on around the corners here, because when you're playing, you don't want your, getting cut on, dragging your fingers on this sharp edge. So nice radius on the ends there. Break all the sharp edges. And she's ready to string up. Let's see what happens. Well, there she is, folks. She plays pretty damn good. I'm surprised how easy it plays with the big heavy strings. I had to fool with the neck a little bit, but it's got a good, about a 12, 13 thou bow in it, cup or whatever. Got the nut tuned in pretty close now. She's looking good. She's playing like a dream, man. Olympic white, matching headstock. Stay tuned. Cray Guitars puts out another one, but this is mine. Yeah, Cowabunga. Surf, baby!